The following podcast may be disturbing to those who support hatred, terrorism, anti-Semitism, and discrimination. Viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to How We Fought Against. And today I have a special guest, Jonathan Elkhoury. Thank you so much for being with us. This is an exciting episode for me. How are you?
I'm great, Tifa. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited as well.
I'm very excited about the background. I see the Israeli flag behind you. That is very, very
Yeah, proud Israeli.
Proud Israeli indeed. So for those of you who don't know Jonathan Elkhoury, which is a shame, I think it's time for you to follow him on social media. He's doing amazing work. But we're gonna give you just a sample of who Jonathan is. He's an amazing, inspiring story. And I think it all starts with you as a very young boy, right? 9-year-old, when you first came to Israel. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, that's correct. Well, I basically fled the country that I was born in from Lebanon. I was born to a father who was part of the South Lebanon Army that was established in 1982 with the help of Israel, and they basically helped each other to fight against terrorism in South Lebanon. Hopefully that one day they could, reach peace between Lebanon and Israel. Unfortunately, that didn't really work out, and in 2000, Israel withdrew out of Lebanon and led us to flee Lebanon because it was taken over by the Hezbollah terrorist organization. And then since then, I'm Israeli.
So you came here, right? Your family fled. You were 9-year-old, and your family fled from South Lebanon because of the development that you mentioned, and you found yourself here. No Hebrew, I assume, right? Arabic speaking from a Christian family. But let me tell you, your Hebrew is perfect and your English is perfect as well. So that's
Thank
quite
you.
amazing.
I studied in an English school in Lebanon. It was an English private school, so I had the basics in Lebanon. And when I came here, I didn't know one word of Hebrew, but the school and the Israeli society really embraced us and helped us. So it took me about 3 months to start to speak fluent Hebrew once I started, going to the public schools in Israel.
Well, it's 3 months. That's impressive. I know people that have been trying to study Hebrew for many years without great success. So, okay, so let's fast forward to, I guess, 2006. That was the next kind of, important experience for you. So tell us what happened then.
So in 2006, in the summer of 2006, the Second Lebanese War started. And I was, at the moment, I was in the United States. And I started watching, all news outlets. I watched the American shows, I watched the Lebanese and the Arabic shows, and I watched the Israeli ones. And because my father and my brother, they were still in Israel and not with us, with me and my mom in the States, suddenly we discovered that the situation is so different than what the American and the Arabic media is telling about what is going on, about the life in Israel. So I started asking my father, I started watching, the different news and to check, different sources. And suddenly I wanted to check more about what's are told about Israel around the world. And I found out a really disturbing image that, they've been lying about our lives in Israel for decades, especially about the minorities' life in Israel. And I wanted, and since 2006, I started step by step to understand more and to learn more about public diplomacy and all about that.
So we know that we as activists, right? We know that you can open any random newspaper in any language, anytime, and find something that bashes Israel and talks about the way that the country Israel is treating its minorities, right? We are called apartheid state, and all kinds of propaganda. So what do you have to say about that, Jonathan?
This is, in my opinion, complete nonsense. People are just looking how to bash and attack Israel, that they will not even check what is correct and what is not. For example, in one of my activities, I was in one campus in the United States, if I'm not mistaken, was in Arizona, and I was speaking to one of the students there. We were doing, some tabling outside, and suddenly he approached me and said, Israel is an apartheid state because the minorities are the Jewish population and the majorities are, the Arabs, the Christians, the Muslims. And I looked at him and I was like, are you actually, did you just said that? Like, the minorities of Israel are 25% are non-Jewish minorities, and we have equal rights as those of the Jewish people. And I started explaining that to him, and suddenly, like, he felt that his whole world has collapsed on him because he didn't even, simple Google can discover what actually makes up the Israeli population. And sometimes anti-Israeli activists, and I'm dividing it from pro-Palestinian activists, the anti-Israeli activists just don't care about anything. They just hate the idea of the existence of the state of Israel.
Well, I have to tell you that I've been looking at this from. I'm trying to be more forgiving about this because, we live in in the 21st centuries, people have very short attention span. When you hear something once, twice, 50 times, 100 times, most of us would just assume that it's true, assume that it's fact, because you've heard it from so many people in so many different times and perspectives. Then, most people don't even, go through the thinking process of this is something that we have to look into. But what does drive me crazy is that when people like me, when I try to do my advocacy and I speak to people and they still would not even open their hearts and minds to listen. But what's interesting is, Johnny, is that I know that when you go to speak on college campuses and in other places, and by the way, I know that you've been traveling a lot, you've competed with me on how many times, we kind of change time zones in 1 week. So you do a lot of that, which is very impressive. But I know that you get a lot of people calling you traitor and think that you're some kind of what? I mean, what do they assume that you're there doing? I mean, I know that you get even, harsher, let's say, words than what I get when I go to do my speaking. Is that right?
Yeah, completely right. What drives me crazy is not people's ignorance sometimes, because you're correct. People sometimes don't really go and look up. And that's why we need to be there on the ground and talk to them. Even, just simple reply on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, or just, say something to change the image a bit or to be present. But the issue is when, for example, I went to campuses in the States or even in Europe, and I spoke as a minority that lives in Israel. It's like a shock to them that a non-Jew would go and support the state of Israel, because in their only imagination is that we are living in these caves, that we are not treated well, that we are not, we're not able to travel, we're not able to have our education, we're not able to enjoy, the simplest things in life. And suddenly when you're there and you kind of destroy every image that they had about Israel, they don't know how to react. And most of the times it goes up with cursing you, it goes up with spitting on you. I've been spat on college campuses in the States. I've been kicked on college campuses. I've been escorted by police because we couldn't, we couldn't walk safely from our event to the parking garage. That's crazy. The police had to escort us out of campus.
Wow.
And, once we had this walk of, and this is today, I find it really funny when I look back at this experience. But a few years ago, I was with another amazing group at UC Irvine in California. And SJP, the Students for Justice in Palestine, that, between them and justice is like here and the United States, like thousands of miles. They've decided to crash our event, and they didn't just crash the event, they wanted to prevent us from even leaving the event room. And afterwards, when the police campus came, they didn't, ask them to leave the premises for us to leave. No, they have divided them into two groups, one on each side of this corridor that we went through, and we had to go through this walk of shame. I don't know if you're familiar with the scene from Game of Thrones where they yell shame,
Shame,
shame.
shame.
Well, I went through that on a college campus in the States.
Did they shave your head?
They did like that. um, so today I laugh at it, but at that moment it was crazy and it was terrifying because you don't know if they're going to do something to you, and because there was occasions that they did something, but sometimes they see minorities supporting Israel as even more worse than a Jewish that is obviously going to support his state.
Well, unfortunately, it's not that obvious, but yeah.
that's
So
that's for you to say.
yeah, yeah. So I know that you've started so many initiatives, and so is there a difference, let's say, with the amount of people that react positively to you and want to join your effort from when you started? Is there a difference? Was there a growth, from then until today?
I see it in two different levels. We have the first level, if I want to talk about the Israeli minorities initiatives. Oh, I started to be activist in the Christian community and the Arabic community in Israel when I finished my national service in 2012. When I started encouraging young, male and female students to join the military or national service and to kind of contribute to the society that they live in. This is one thing that I really appreciate and really care for. Um, and later on, we started talking about not only our presence in Israel and how we can be active in our citizenship and not just, to get our rights and do nothing, to sit aside and just complain. If you want to change something, you need to go and be active in this community and not just, complain all the time. And when we started that, suddenly we saw a lot of people that joined forces. But when I started, um, I was I talked a lot about putting minorities in the head of Israel advocacy because I believe that this comes from a different perspective. Whether you agree with it or not, or maybe partially agree with it, it's obvious that sometimes a Jewish person is going to go and support the Jewish democratic state. But when it comes from a minority, it's seen and it shows it from a different perspective and levels,
Yeah.
and we wanted to show that. So when I started the Minorities Project, it was the first of its kind project that actually brought together Muslims, Christians, Druze, and Bedouins to go and speak and tell their Israeli story. um, we immediately went overbooking by night because a
Wow.
lot of people wanted to bring us to their campuses and their communities, both Jewish, both Muslim, both Christian communities around the world, to hear from us, because it was on two levels as well. It was one, educational. This is the Israeli minorities. Yes, we have some disagreements. Yes, we have some issues that we need to fix. So in Israel, we're going to fight for our communities, everyone for his own. But abroad, we're going to fight for our country because eventually we'll live here and we want it to be a good, state, and we wanted to cherish and be the beacon of light in the Middle East. But on the other hand, once we arrived to the States, the majority of the non-Jewish that were really against the state of Israel to begin with, we kind of put them in a huge dilemma because suddenly it's not the typical normal story of an Israeli Jewish guy or a girl that served in the military and then wanted to speak positively about Israel. It's a minority that some of them did national service, some of them did military service, some of them didn't do either of that, but they wanted. But what concluded us eventually together is that we are Israelis and we support the state of Israel. And suddenly, a lot of people were inspired by it, because it kind of gave them some hope that we can make a difference. And it changed a lot in the Arabic street because suddenly a lot of initiatives started to pop up in the Arab street of small organizations that started to want to integrate more the Arab society inside the Israeli society. And I'm really happy that I was one of the first to begin with this amazing, change of mind and heart that is happening in the Arab street in Israel.
So that part of what we're trying to do in this podcast is to bring people like you, and I think we're all like that, right? I mean, we all had a dream. We didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. We didn't know what impact can we possibly have, as individuals, as one person. And then, you just stand up and start doing something and look at what you have accomplished. So do you have anything you want to say to, young or not so young, men and women that are listening to you now? I mean, what can they possibly do sitting at home being so frustrated about one problem or another? What is your message?
Well, my message is that I believe that everyone can add something to the conversation regarding to anything that happens. So it can start with small, talkbacks online, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Just put your opinions out there, and it could lead you to speaking more about it in public. Going to sometimes, I believe that we need to be present during apartheid weeks on campuses in front of them, not to destroy their demonstration or their whatever they're doing there, but to be in front of them to show the other side. Many times there's no one there. There's no one there to protect Israel or to show the Israeli side. So it's important that everyone no matter where he is, just go there and speak to people about it. And it can continue. I started on a really small basis where it started with me telling my personal story as a refugee from Lebanon that found shelter in Israel. Later on, it continued to be, how are we integrated to the Israeli society? But suddenly, at one point, it started, speaking in general about the minorities in Israel and about the Israeli population. So from being in my small city in Haifa, speaking to my fellow students in the classroom, that's how I started, by telling my story to one friend by the other. It led me eventually, 6 years later, after I started my activity, to be in Dubai and to talk with Emiratis about Israel and our lives as minorities in Israel. So there's nowhere that you can't imagine something and you won't do it, because the world is amazing, and you can reach whatever you want.
Wow. So let me ask you, Tachlis question. People are saying, and I hear this all the time, that you bring minorities or of every kind, right? You bring Christians and Muslims or the LGBTQ community and et cetera, to pink wash, to whitewash, to this or that wash, whatever they want to wash. And understanding that, the world is complex, right? I mean, being a citizen of any country is complex, and being a minority in any country is complex. So what do you say to that? What is your answer to, when people say, there are, these huge problems, as they describe it, with the state of Israel and minorities in Israel?
Well, I can be a priest that baptize a lot of people because a lot of people, accuse me of all this washing.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that eventually this thing really, I really take it really deeply, because the issue is that sometimes they blame Israel about things that they will never dare to blame the other countries. Israel is is getting more advanced today on LGBTQ issues, more, women rights, minorities rights, and everything like that. But for example, they will never touch other countries in the Middle East that are treating women poorly, and this is an understatement. Treating LGBTQ communities as they were, people that needs treatments because they are against nature, but they only target Israel, and this is something that really bothers me. And I tried, for example, I wanted to do a piece about LGBTQ community in Jordan, and I approached one of the organizations that basically works online in Jordan. And I said, hi, my name is Jonathan Elkhoury. I'm an LGBTQ activist, and I'm writing a piece about, life in Jordan. I would like to get your perspective, because I don't want to be only about what is going on social media or the news outlets. And they were like, we are aware of pink washing, so we refuse to connect with you or even speak to you about this subject. And I'm like, what does that have to do with pink washing? I'm not showing the Israeli side. I want to show the Jordanian side. And this is something that really blew up my mind. that how far people would go just to disregard us and to dehumanize us and to kind of take us out of the equation about advancement in the world. And hopefully that people will understand that, you know, they can say whatever they want, but we are like that. You know, this is Israel, and we're not going to hide our advancement, and we're not going to hide that we are open-minded and that we welcome all communities, and we welcome all people, no matter what color they are, no matter what is their sexual orientation, and no matter what is their religion. So this is who we are, and we're not going to be sorry about it.
You know, there was an incident a little while ago that there was a gay film festival here in Tel Aviv. And obviously, it can be a physical film festival, so it became a virtual film festival, like everything else since Corona started. But you know,
Like
they've
this
had so
meeting.
many creators around the world that wanted to contribute to that festival, and then BDS kind of, you know, caught on to that and started targeting a lot of these participants. And so there were a few that wrote back or signed a petition saying they will not participate in the pink washing or the whitewashing or something washing of the Israeli gay film festival, which to me is mind-boggling. That's an understatement. I don't understand, you know, how. First of all, I mean, obviously, again, there are challenges, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're one of the most liberal countries that I know, and I know. And second of all, you know, I tried to say, let's try to set up a gay pride parade in the Palestinian territories, and let's see how that, you know, how that would turn out. So, you know, how people are blind to these type of arguments and just, you know, dying to jump on that hate wagon to, you know, to boycott, to delegitimize, is just beyond me, and it's infuriating. I mean, I can't think of a better word.
You know, on that matter, a few months ago, the Palestinian Authority have issued a statement that they're going to persecute everyone that is part of the LGBTQ organization in the West Bank. And and that blew my mind that only the Israeli media talked about it. But moreover, and that was complete nonsense in my opinion, is that the same organization that is targeted by the Palestinian Authority, they issued a statement against the state of Israel. And I was like there, okay, wow, how blind and how hateful can you be that you're not even able to issue a statement that, for people that is literally persecuting you, and issue the statement that every person needs to help the authorities to catch you and caught you. And by the way, this is, for example, one of the double standards that we're talking about. The same organization is written under the Israeli law as a legitimate organization. His donations comes, you know, to Israeli bank systems, and their offices are in East Jerusalem that is under Israeli control. So this is, for example, they're getting protected by Israeli police, they're getting protected by Israeli government, they're getting protected by Israeli lawyers to help them, you know, make their own organization.
Mm-hmm.
That eventually they target the Israeli government instead of going against the people who are persecuting them.
Yes, and so, you know, what people don't understand when you live under any type of totalitarian regime, like the PA is in a sense a totalitarian regime, then civil society is not what we know in liberal democracies. I mean, it's not like you can stand up and criticize the government. It doesn't matter what the policy is. I mean, if you open your mouth, you know, that's a real problem that can end very, very badly. Unlike, you know, democracies where you see, you know, you get a lot of your funding, you know, just because you're criticizing the government. Certainly get the protection that freedom of the press, freedom of association, freedom of speech grant you in our society. So that kind of creates that, you know, paradox type of situations that you were referring to. So Palestinian organizations work out of Israel, get fully protected by Israel. They still remain afraid of the PA. So they will not criticize the PA's policy no matter what, even if they undermine their very existence and the cause that they're trying to promote. So that's the paradox. and people need to kind of understand that. And I assume that you deal with that a lot. When I mean, you go around campus and people, see you. I assume other, Arabs that come out of whatever the Arab world, different countries around the Middle East, and do they confront you that you're a traitor, that you're not speaking the truth? What type of, tell us an inspirational story of an impact that you personally have made on a person.
Well, I've been called so many names. For example, I'm a Mossad agent. I'm a Jew that is saying that he's Christian just to people support Israel. I'm lying about me being non-Jewish, and so more of these stories. One of I think, in my opinion, one of the best stories. If we want to finish up in this positive way. I've been to the University of Houston in Texas, U of H, University of Houston in Texas, 2 years ago. And we were there during Apartheid Week and Pro-Israeli Week. We were speaking to students, and suddenly this person that is part of the student government body, he approaches me, and we started talking, about Israel and that. And I noticed that he doesn't believe in the existence of Israel, or he doesn't support the existence of Israel. So I asked him one simple question. I asked him, do you believe that the Jewish people are, do they have a right, a human right, for their own country and to their own autonomy? And he replied a simple no. So I asked him, do you consider yourself as a human rights activist? And he said, yes, of course. So I told him, really simple. In my opinion, you're not a human rights activist because you don't believe in the right of self-determination of the Jewish people. He took that really into heart. And then I refused to continue a conversation with him. I just turned around and left the area. A year after, in this February, I was on my last trip before coronavirus.
Before Corona.
I visited Houston, Texas again, and I was at that campus because we wanted to do some sort of event with the students there. And the Hillel fellow, Nofal Salman, her name, she's amazing, by the way. She invited us to Hillel, and suddenly I noticed that this guy is sitting at the Hillel office. And then I asked, the Hillel fellow, like, what is he doing here? Like, I remember that we had like a really heated conversation last time, and I interrupted it. And she said, well, after your conversation with him, I kind of went on and, followed up on your conversation. And I wanted to check with him more about, his opinions and his ideas. And then she said, eventually he comes around to Hillel events once in a while, and he's really interested in getting involved and eventually, to hearing both sides. So he's not pro-Israeli, but he's willing to listen and to hear more about it. So then we went along, and that day we went shopping together, like the four of us, like me, the Hillel fellow, the other student that was with me on the delegation, and another student from Hillel from the university. We spent whole day together, and we kept on speaking, and we took photos together. And this is, for me, an example of something that you put in people's hearts, but you need to make sure to follow up and continue on speaking to them and not, block them completely. So this is something that I'm really happy that happened, because sometimes you need a person to just, cut it while it is and say it in the face. And you need another person to be more, more hugging and more welcoming, to try and walk you step by step towards that. So it's kind of a teamwork that we do, and I'm really happy about it. And he was supposed to come to Israel, but unfortunately coronavirus happened. So we postponed our meeting in Israel. But hopefully that more I've heard a lot of students that went through the same phases that he did, and I'm really happy that our activity is really helping out, because it's opening people's minds and hearts.
So I think bottom line is if you are willing to be present, right, and do the best that you can do, and if the more of us just become, just be present and speak to people and learn about, what we need to explain to others, and get to be more familiarized with, our own history and our own reality, whether it's a legal or historical or whatever it is, then, we can be better advocates and we can be better adversaries. So I think that what you have covered is basically is being an ambassador in your own community, being an ambassador in within many minority communities in Israel, since you've opened the gate for a lot of people to follow you, and a lot of people have. Like, I know the numbers; it's very, very impressive, and a lot of people have and are still, following the footsteps of a few, pioneers in that area. That when was this? 10 years ago? Not even, right? I mean, when?
Yeah, 2000. It started in 2012.
2012. So that's really incredible. And then of course to students and other communities around, mostly the United States, but not just, right? I mean, everywhere basically.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
everywhere.
everywhere.
From the States to Europe to Canada to Dubai.
To Dubai, yeah. That you just came back, right, Johnny? You just came back from
Yeah.
Dubai. I saw the
Yeah,
video that you posted on.
ago.
I saw the video that you posted. I mean, you just walked into the market and you saw this fruit stand with the Emirati and then the Israeli flag, just there
that
in
was
the market.
amazing. That was so thrilling to see the Israeli flag out there in the center, in the entrance, not only the center, but everyone to see and look and buy. And this is like in the eye of the BDS movement, because in the UAE they're putting the Israeli flag for people to buy and not to boycott. And
Wow.
that's the whole difference in a small example.
So we live in a time that going over to the Gulf, right, to the UAE as an Israeli or as an Israeli Arab advocating for Israel, you get a much better welcome, right? You get an amazing, exciting, hugs and kisses from people. That, at least that's what I understand. Which to us as Israelis,
more safe. I felt more safe traveling with Israeli flag in Dubai than in Europe or in the States.
Can you imagine such a time? I mean, if I had told you this a year ago, that you would go to the UAE and feel like this and be greeted like this, and
3 weeks ago.
No, you couldn't believe it, right?
I couldn't believe it. No.
But I think I think this is something that we, I wish that the Europeans and North Americans would just stop and ask themselves, how did we get to this situation? How can an Israeli or a Jew or a pro-Israel activist or a minority from Israel go, with a smiling face like yours, trying to advocate what you feel is justice, and you get so much hatred and violence toward you when you go around the West, and then we're all just speechless about this development with the UAE and Bahrain. But the difference is just something for us to pause and think about. Seriously think about, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
For sure. Johnny, let me tell you again, I'm so happy that you were here with us. Do you want to tell us how people can reach out to you if anyone wants to help you, to join, to volunteer? How can they do that? What's the best way?
Well, I'm available on social media, both on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Just write my name, Jonathan Elkhoury, and you'll reach me. I'm, my inbox is always open for options and people, and people, if you want to listen more to this story, just feel welcome to, can I invite a lecture.
Invite Jonathan. He has a lot of different organizations that he works with, but he'll come and speak and share his personal story with anyone who would listen. You forgive me for saying that in your name, but I know you well enough.
Oh yeah.
To feel comfortable saying that. So thanks a lot for everything that you have done and everything that you will be doing in the future. And it's been a pleasure to having you here. Thanks so much, Johnny.
Thank you very much, Shifa.
All right, great. See you soon, I hope.
Bye.
Bye-bye.